Silence was always louder than shouting inside the Alden estate. I remember how the marble floors never warmed, even in summer. The ceilings towered like judgment, and the chandeliers didn't shine, they watched. That house never whispered secrets, it swallowed them. You could cry inside those walls and the echo would come back colder. I'd learned to listen to the silence. It told me everything I needed. The dining room was always the worst. No one made eye contact. No one passed the salt unless asked twice. Margaret used to be the only one who looked at me with anything close to love. She'd touch my cheek and say, "No house is too grand to become a prison, darling." And she was right. When she died, it was like the last bit of warmth was buried with her. The others moved on like she'd been a seasonal guest, not the woman who held the family together. Celeste turned colder. Franklin vanished into meetings. Jackson and Betrayal, well, they became crueler, more confident in their cruelty. I was still there, still breathing, still pretending not to count the weeks. Still pregnant. No one mentioned it. But I caught the glances when I moved slower than usual or when I left food untouched. They all knew. No one asked. Celeste handed me a list of chores that morning. Ironing linens for an event I wasn't invited to. Cleaning baseboards I'd never dirted. I took the paper and nodded. I didn't say anything. I didn't say I was tired. Or that I'd been having dreams of Margaret whispering something I could never quite hear. It was easier to let them believe I was too numb to speak. Easier to disappear piece by piece than fight every moment. That evening, they summoned me to the living room. It felt like a trap before I even stepped in. The curtains were drawn. The fire was lit, not for warmth, just drama. Celeste sat with a folder on her lap, the others arranged around her like board members ready to vote. She didn't waste time. "This is a legal agreement," she said, as if we were strangers. "If you sign this, you relinquish all claim to the Alden estate and foundation. In return, we'll provide 2 months of rent and a non-disclosure clause to protect the family." Her words were sharp, practiced. I didn't blink. "This isn't your home." "It never was," she added. "You were a favor. A dying woman's last whim." Franklin kept his eyes on his shoes. Jackson smirked. "So, how long are you planning to milk this pregnancy? The pity tour's getting old." Brielle's laugh was brittle. "She thinks she's family." No one asked how I felt. No one wondered where I'd go. I looked at each of them, one by one, memorizing their faces like I was writing a will with my eyes. I heard Margaret's voice again in my head, "You don't have to prove your worth, darling. Just live." So I stayed silent. I didn't argue. That was the only power I had left in that room. Dinner was even worse. There were guests, donors, friends of the foundation, and ambassador's wife. I wore a black dress that no longer fit around my belly, and they made me sit at the far end of the table. Celeste lifted her wine glass. "To new beginnings," she said. Brielle clinked her glass to mine. "To our charity case, who still won't tell us who fathered her baby." Someone laughed. A man. Another guest looked away, embarrassed. I stood. My chair didn't scrape. I moved slowly, gently. I walked out without saying a word. In my old bedroom, the only one Margaret had decorated, I sat on the edge of the bed and rested my hands on the small rise of my stomach. "They don't get to name you," I whispered. That was power too. I remembered a day, years ago, when I'd overheard Celeste telling Jackson she regretted not putting me in foster care. I was 14. I never forgot. The next morning, Celeste sent a message through Betrayal. I was barred from attending the Alden Foundation's gala. It's for the family, she said with a smile too wide. I asked Franklin, gently, if we could talk. He took me to his office and closed the door halfway. Sometimes, love is choosing peace, he said. You'll understand when you're a parent. That was his justification for staying quiet, for watching me drown and doing nothing. He wouldn't save me. He never had. Betrayal handed me an envelope later that day. Mother says you should start packing. I nodded. There was no suitcase. Just a duffel. I moved slowly. I folded Margaret's letters and hid one thing in my coat, a key. Small and gold. Margaret had given it to me before she died and said, someday, when the house turns colder than the world, you'll know what to do. The snow came that night. Heavy and clean. The kind that buries things instead of frosting them. I stood by the window, watching it fall. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where the road would lead. But I knew I had to leave. And I knew I wasn't alone. Not anymore. My hand rested on the curve of my belly. Then, the knock. I turned slowly. Betrayal stood in the doorway, silhouetted in soft yellow hallway light. They've decided, she said, voice syrupy sweet. You leave tonight. It's time, Betrayal said, her voice floating through the dim hallway like perfume that soured in the air. She wore concern like costume jewelry, bright, cheap, and easily snapped. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, 7 months of weight clinging to my belly and a silence thick enough to choke on. It's snowing, I said. Heavily. You can't. Celeste appeared behind her daughter, calm and cruel as ever. Her robe trailed along the polished floors like smoke from a fire already lit. You chose to disobey this family, she said without raising her voice. Actions have consequences. Behind her, Franklin adjusted his glasses. Didn't move. Didn't speak. Jackson leaned against the banister, arms crossed. Don't worry. You'll land on your feet, he smirked. You're too damn stubborn to die. It was rehearsed. Orchestrated. I wasn't being cast out in a moment of passion. This had been the plan all along, to disappear me quietly, like a stain wiped clean from a family portrait. They handed me a duffel bag someone else had packed. I walked out. No one followed. The wind clawed through my coat the second the door clicked shut behind me. It wasn't just snowing, it was punishing. Sharp, relentless. The kind of cold that doesn't bite, it burrows. I didn't cry. I didn't have the energy. My phone buzzed once before dying completely. No bars. No signal. Just a black screen in a blacker night. I made it to the edge of the estate, to a small, forgotten shed behind what used to be the greenhouse. Once the gardener's quarters, long since abandoned. A warped door, a broken window, and a floor littered with dried leaves and dust. Inside, I found folded tarps in the corner. I curled up on top of them, wrapping my coat tighter, pulling it around the bump like a shield. My fingers shook, my breath fogged in front of me, and for the first time I felt fear. Not of dying. But of being erased. Everything blurred. My thoughts came in pieces, scattered and looping. Margaret. The key. The contract. The eyes that watched me leave. I don't remember falling asleep. Just the cold. Creeping deeper. And deeper. A sharp knock snapped me awake. Daylight filtered in through a crack in the door. I sat up too fast, pain shooting through my side. I stumbled to the door, nothing. No one. I blinked, wiped my face. My cheeks were swollen. My fingers, useless. Inside the coat, I found the backup phone I'd stashed months ago. Old, cracked, barely functioning. But it turned on. That's when I saw it. A video. Trending. My face. My body curled on the snow, caught through a shaky lens. Captioned, "Ungrateful pregnant girl leaves $10 million mansion." Comments flooded the screen. Classic case of entitlement. Bet the baby isn't even real. Damn, she could have had it all. She's faking it. Obvious. The laughter of strangers hit harder than the cold. But worse than all of it, I knew who filmed it. The angle, the timing. Someone in that house. Someone who wanted the world to laugh before it mourned. That's when it hit me, they didn't just want me gone. They wanted me broken. Night fell like a threat. I didn't move for hours, not until I heard the crunch of snow outside. Soft. Hesitant. I tensed. But no one knocked. Instead, just beyond the threshold, someone left a thermos, a wrapped sandwich, and a coat. A man's coat. Thick, too large for me, and warm. Inside the pocket, a napkin folded carefully. 3 words, scrawled in shaky ink, "Stay." Not yet. I ran to the door, looked into the dark, but saw only a pair of boots disappearing beyond the tree line. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Instead, I ate. Slowly. Each bite a declaration. I wasn't ready to die. Not like this. Not here. The food warmed more than my body, it ignited something else. A flicker of fury beneath the fear. Not a flame yet. Just a spark. If I survive tonight, I whispered to the darkness, I won't go back. I'll never ask again. I'll build something they can't tear down. Later, I found a rusted car in the far corner of the shed. The mirror was cracked, but intact. I looked into it. My face was pale, lips split. My eyes, mine again. "You," I said, laying a hand on my belly, "will never beg to be loved." Not like I did. I reached into my coat's lining. The key was still there. Margaret had placed it in my palm once with a whisper, "In case the house forgets you belong." I didn't know what it unlocked. But I knew it wasn't meant for escape, it was for reclamation. That night, I tore a page from the back of the old gardener's logbook and began to write. The list of what they can't take. I wrote it twice. Once for me. Once for the child inside me. Before dawn, I walked back to the estate. Not to beg. Just to see. I stood at the back door. Knocked once. Waited. 1 minute. 2. Nothing. I leaned in, rested my forehead against the cold wood. "I knew it," I whispered. Then I turned. And didn't look back. I arrived at the bus station just as dawn cracked the sky, pale light scattering across the industrial outskirts of the town like an apology. My feet were swollen, the coat I pulled around me 2 months ago was still wrapped too tightly, and I wondered if I would ever feel safe again. The bus smelled of old heat and stale coffee. I counted the seconds until the door hissed open, stepped off and carried my duffel toward a cheap motel with neon letters flickering overhead. The clerk gave me a look I knew, rich girl gone broke, he thought. I paid cash, every bill a promise to myself. That night, I moved into a weekly rental room with peeling paint and a heater that clanked like a cheap drum. I walked into a small law office the next day for orientation. Files stacked high, coffee stains on every desk. Elora Grant greeted me quietly. She didn't ask why I left the mansion, she simply offered me a desk with a window that faced nothing but brick. "Here," she said. "You'll have room to think." As I sat, I realized I was both less and more than I'd been. I was no one again. And that felt relieving, until I remembered I was now two people in one body. That evening, under the flicker of the motel bulb, I counted coins on the bed. I said it aloud, "We'll make it." The belly beneath my sweater moved. I felt a faint flutter of life, a quiet insistence that we would. A cracked mirror in the motel bathroom faced me the first morning. I barely recognized the reflection, pale face, tired eyes, hand resting on the curve of the belly. I whispered to it, "You're all I have left." I remembered the Alden Mansion's portraits, how my image was never framed, how I never saw myself among them. I raised the phone, snapped a photo. First step, reclaiming identity. Later that week, I fainted at the desk. The clinic said stress could end the pregnancy. "You need stability," the doctor said. I heard the words but felt something else. Pride is the only thing keeping me alive. That night I sat in the motel's cheap chair, wrote on a scrap of paper, "No one will ever erase my name again." My hand shook, but I didn't erase. A lunch hour brought the next blow. Elora showed me an online article, Marlowe Quinn Alden Studies in Paris After Reconciliation. The woman in the photo wasn't me, same dress, same hair. But the name, the legacy, the lie, it was mine. I felt my heart throttle. "They've replaced me," I said, voice tiny in the break room. Elora only looked at me and said, "Don't go to war without armor." I photocopied the article, pinned it to the motel wall. It became my fuel, my challenge. Somewhere between the newspaper folds and my swelling ankle, I realized, I wasn't invisible anymore, they were erasing me. And I wasn't going to let that happen. Walking the grocery aisles became public therapy. A homeless man stared. "Ain't you that spoiled girl?" he asked. I kept moving. On the bus, I overheard a woman say, "Shame, pregnant and alone." My hand rested on my coat. I didn't respond. I realized, I had been surrounded by people who wanted me smaller, quieter. At night, I pulled out the box under the bed. Letters addressed to Celeste. I didn't send them. Not yet. Sharp words. Raw memories. I kept them behind me, the evidence of a life that refused to stay hidden. Elora came one evening with soup and prenatal vitamins. "You remind me of someone who lost everything and didn't stay broken," she said. I folded my arms. "I'm not broken. Just rearranged." We sat in the flickering motel light. She pulled case files of inheritance disputes, false identities. She said, "Power hides in paper, not words." I opened one. I read. I imagined the future, not survival. Preparation. Late at night, I sat at the desk, hummed the lullaby my mother once sang. Then the ping. New email. Unknown sender. Subject, "Do you want the truth about Margaret's will?" My breath caught. Attachment, confidential, property of Alden and Sons Legal. I whispered, "Elora, what did you do?" My finger hovered. I clicked. When the invitation arrived, I thought it was a mistake. A charity event, addressed to Volunteer 108, signed by the Alden Foundation. I assumed Elora had placed me there, someone helping me transition. I never realized it was a trap. Walking into Manhattan's ballroom, I recognized the high vaulted ceiling, the ornate columns, the same architecture I had once been humiliated beneath. My heartbeat sped. I adjusted my uniform quietly. I was no longer hiding. I was observing. I wasn't their ghost anymore, I told myself. I was the witness. Service trays in hand, I moved among donors and dignitaries. I served glasses of champagne to women in silk shawls, men in polished shoes. No one recognized me. No one asked. Celeste Alden arrived on stage with perfect timing. A smile as flawless as the chandeliers above us. My eyes caught Lucian Reed standing beside a senator. The same face that haunted my memory, the same silhouette etched into my mind. His expression? A flicker. Recognition. But he stayed silent. He gave a nod, small. Enough. Celeste launched into her speech, forgiveness heals. Family rebuilds. Together we rise. My tray rattled. I steadied it. My fingers clenched. The words burned. She quoted Margaret's favorite lines, as if stealing from the dead was honorable. In the crowd someone murmured, "Isn't that the girl from the Snow video?" The words drifted through the room like a chill. I froze. Then kept going. One glass at a time. My heart pounding behind the mask I'd sewn on long ago. Lucian watched. His jaw tightened. I sensed something behind the restraint, solidarity, perhaps. I'd expected to be crushed. Unexpectedly, I felt iron under my ribs. I wasn't fleeing. I was standing. When the screen rose for the charity video, I felt the spotlight shift. The montage showed smiling children, laughing donors. Then a still. Me. Snow. Pregnant. Collapsed. A caption, "Ungrateful heiress leaves home in disgrace." Laughter skimmed the edges of the room. The humiliation, the exact moment I left. Celeste waited. Calm. Controlling. She said softly, "Forgive her. Every family has its prodigal." A hush settled. I looked at the glass in my hand. Cold. I remembered the night I left. The duffel bag. The snow. The phone with no signal. I remembered the key Margaret gave me. I remembered screaming silence. I raised the glass, straightened. Lucian stepped beside me. He lowered his voice, "Not yet. Wait." I didn't break. But I changed. Their game became mine. Outside, under neon city lights, Lucian handed me an envelope. The world shrank to that moment. I opened it. Margaret's will, dated a month before her death. My name. The lake house. A share of the foundation. They buried it, he said quietly. The vault locked after Celeste filed a fake revocation. My hands shook. I exhaled. Why help me? I asked. Because someone finally has to stop pretending she's untouchable. His words were a promise. One I accepted. Inside my apartment, I spread the prints, the will, the video stills, the letters to Celeste I never sent. I opened my phone recorder. My name is Marlowe Quinn. And this is not a confession. It's evidence. I typed my first email to myself and to Alora and to the investigator Lucian introduced me to. In that moment, truth became louder than fear. The notification pinged, Alden Foundation's PR responds to allegations. The headline flashed, former volunteer attempts to extort the Alden family. I stared. Then I smiled. They began the war. I just accepted the battlefield. The courthouse wasn't grand. It was gray and unceremonious, and yet, as Marlo stepped inside, it felt monumental. She didn't walk in as the fallen daughter or the scandalized volunteer. She walked in as the one demanding accountability. Her suit was simple, black, clean lines, practical shoes. Her posture held history and refusal. This wasn't about comfort. This was about clarity. Elora Grant kept her pace even, briefing Marlo quietly. We'll request a closed courtroom. No media frenzy. Marlo didn't blink. No. Let the light in. Sunlight's the best disinfectant. Reporters lined the entrance. Cameras clicked. Whispers filled the air. Is Lucian funding this? Why now? What's she really after? Inside, Franklin's seat was conspicuously empty. Jackson leaned back in his chair like a man watching a play he wrote. Celeste wore pearl earrings, her hands clasped, her face passive as marble. Marlo met her gaze. No fear. No tremble. Just the cold focus of someone who knew she no longer needed permission to speak. They called for a recess after the first half hour of motions. During the break, a legal assistant delivered a thick envelope to Marlo's table. Inside, a settlement. Large figures, a non-disclosure, and a letter filled with hollow flattery. Marlo stood and faced the judge. I reject this offer. Ms. Quinn, are you aware? I didn't come to bargain. I came to reveal. The court grew still. Elora placed a recorder on the desk and pressed play. Margaret's voice, frail yet clear, filled the chamber. She was the only one who stayed. That house was always hers. A nurse's sworn statement followed. Then the forged documents, obtained through Lucian's investigator, appeared on the screen, dates, signatures, discrepancies. The final blow? A scanned memo sealing the original will inside an Alden Foundation vault. The judge leaned forward. I am granting a temporary injunction on all Alden Foundation transactions, effective immediately. Celeste's fingernails bit into her palm. Jackson's smirk faltered. And outside, the world responded. Hashtags surged. Not for money trended overnight. She's not seeking revenge. She's seeking the truth, one tweet read. Justice isn't loud. It's exact. For the first time in public memory, an Alden had lost control of the story. The next day, Celeste Alden stood behind a podium beneath the Alden Foundation banner. Cameras rolled. She delivered her statement with impeccable timing. We are a family that has always cherished unity, even through pain. I apologize for any misunderstandings that may have arisen. No tears. No emotion. Just polished regret. Marlo watched it alone on her couch, coffee cooling beside her. She still thinks the world spins on her permission. Lucian's voice came through the phone an hour later. That apology? It wasn't for you. Marlo's reply was quiet. It never was. She didn't need Celeste's remorse. She needed her reach to stop. 2 days later, Marlo sat down in front of a neutral gray backdrop, a single mic between her and the world. This isn't about my inheritance, she said. It's about how legacy is weaponized. How silence is inherited. Her story went live at 9 a.m. By noon, it had 4 million views. Comments flooded in from daughters, sons, nurses, caretakers, people long buried under money and manners. My brother did this to our mother. She's telling my story. Marlo didn't flinch. Her truth had reached the people it needed to. An email came through that evening from a congressional subcommittee. They wanted her to speak on financial abuse within families. Another from a university law school offering her a guest lecturer slot. Then a reform group. Would she consider joining their advisory board? She didn't cry. But she did smile. Lucian arrived at dusk, no announcement, just the low hum of a car engine pulling up to her building. He stepped into her apartment with a folder, not flowers. "Business proposal," he said. "Let's build something where no one gets erased." Marlo flipped through the pages. Public trust initiatives, joint projects, equal stakes. No fine print that said you belong to me. Just shared impact. Not charity, he added. Accountability. Visibility. Legacy. She didn't sign. But she didn't refuse. "Not yet," she said. "But keep the jet fueled." He nodded. Left the folder. Didn't touch her. Just smiled with something that felt like patience. Or hope. A plain envelope came through Alora's office. No return address. Just Marlo's name written in an elegant hand. Inside was a letter. The ink was slightly smudged, aged, but deliberate. "If you're reading this, it means you chose truth over comfort. I'm proud of you, my girl." Signed, simply, Margaret. Marlo held the paper to her chest. She closed her eyes and felt neither broken nor victorious. "Maybe blood made me an Alden," she whispered, "but choices make me something else." Outside, wind curled through the trees like memory. The sky above the private airstrip near Denver had turned a quiet shade of dawn pink. I held Nova in my arms, the Rockies behind us like silent witness. The snow-covered night I once believed defined me seemed distant now, a memory, yes, but no longer the mold I lived in. I had carried cold in my bones, in hushes and hidden keys. Here, the tarmac felt like a fresh page. Lucian Reed's jet sat ready, its logo glinting in the early light. He stepped forward and opened the door of possibility. I stepped in. I didn't look back at the Alden house because I already left it behind when I said yes to truth. Have you ever left a place that claimed you, even though it never let you belong? Because I did. I closed my eyes for a moment. The engines hummed, a soft roar promising ascent. I let that roar fill the emptiness. When the wheels lifted off the runway, I remembered Nova's first cry, fierce and raw in the hospital corridor. I whispered to her, "We both get to start again." Alora Grant's voice echoed, "Your legacy isn't inherited. It's claimed." Through the window I watched the hangar that bore the sign Alden Aviation grow small and then fade into the shadow of our departure. I wasn't running. I was stepping forward. I turned and said quietly to Nova, "You weren't born into their story. We're writing ours." The engine whined into climb. Below, the small estate dissolved into a patchwork of ice and regret. Above, the sky opened. A shift in perspective. I didn't feel guilty that I walked away. I felt certain. As the altitude increased, I stared at shrinking snow-covered peaks, the white caps now tinged with morning gold. A news alert pinged my phone. Alden Foundation responds to legal ruling, operations paused pending restructuring. My leaving had seeded consequence, not revenge. Lucian placed an envelope in my lap. Inside, a draft charter for the Quinn and Reed Trust, a foundation for women silenced by legacy. The plane banked, the earth fell away. My heart pounded, not with fear, but validation. I leaned into the seat and whispered, "This flight has no return ticket." In the cabin, Nova slept. Lucian sat across from me, calm. I called the meeting to order. We're here because someone said we didn't belong. They were wrong. The board included women I'd helped, legal reform advocates, and one anonymous commenter from the night in the snow. I cited Coco Chanel. The most courageous act is still to think for yourself. Aloud. I signed the charter document, Quinn and Reed Women's Agency, to safeguard inheritance rights and expose hidden family trusts. My voice stayed steady. No anger. Just anchor. Nova in my lap, I faced the camera across the cabin for a recorded message to others. If you've ever been told you had no place at the table, build your own table. I did. A notification popped. A viewer aged 65 wrote, "You gave me permission to leave the family business behind." I didn't flare with emotion. I just reached for my phone and smiled softly. The jet's window framed a horizon moving faster than regret. When the jet touched down, I sent Celeste Alden a photo, Nova's first smile, unsentimentally simple. Her reply, "Congratulations." My response, "Thank you for finally letting me fly." I watched the wheels slow, the airstrip open into possibility. The snow had melted, but the lessons it left were carved into my bones.